Hey guys, so today I'm showing you how I prepared this tender roasted pork shoulder. So we're going to be making pernil, another perfect holiday recipe to add this to your holiday menu. So let's get started with the recipe. Okay guys, so here is my piece of pork shoulder, bone in and with the fat cap on top of it. Okay, so I already washed it. So what I'm gonna do now is use my knife. You want to use a small knife to kind of peel back the fat cap on top of the pork shoulder. Okay, and I'm using a 9-pound pork shoulder. So I'm just gonna take my knife and peel back the fat cap. You don't want to remove it completely, but you want to peel it back so we can season the piece of pork really well. So I know it looks like it'll be hard to peel the fat cap back, but it's really not. You just got to use a small knife and take your time and start from one side and like slice that side back first, and then just work your way around to the other side of the pork. Okay, so once I'm finished peeling back the skin of the pork, I'm gonna make some holes in the pork shoulder, and this is gonna be to season the inside of the pork, and I'm gonna stuff it with garlic and some seasonings. All right, so just use the small knife and make some holes all over the pork on both sides. So I took a few cloves of garlic and I sliced them in about threes, and this is what I'm gonna use to stuff the holes in the pork shoulder. So what you want to do is drizzle the pork on both sides with some olive oil. Okay, so just rub it down with the olive oil, and then I'm just taking the slits of garlic, and you want to stuff it in all of the holes that you poked. So make sure you add enough holes because you want to perfectly season the pork shoulder so that the flavors marinate all through it. Okay, and you're going to stuff the garlic on both sides. In every hole you made, you want to put a piece of garlic. Okay, so now I'm taking my green seasoning mix. You can use green seasoning. You could also use sofrito. Either one, it's totally fine. I'll list my recipe for green seasoning in the description box down below, so you guys can check it out there. You can also buy it already prepared in the Caribbean section of your grocery store. Okay, and what you want to do is rub the green seasoning or sofrito all over the pork on both sides, and you also want to push some of the green seasoning mix down into the holes we poked earlier. All right, so that's that good flavor. You want it to go in the holes as well. So after I rub the pork down with the green seasoning, I'm going to use a dry seasoning mix. So I mix together some all-purpose seasoning, a little bit of black pepper, some salt, and dried oregano together. You could also add some ground cumin, and I'm going to rub my pork down with that mixture. All right, again, you want to get both sides, and of course lift up the fat cap and rub the pork down really well. And the all-purpose seasoning blend I'm using is by the Kitchen Crave. I'll list it in the description box as well, so if you guys would like to try it, you can purchase it from them. Okay, so just make sure you season the pork shoulder really well. So you want to make sure you add enough salt on the pork, okay, because the salt is gonna get absorbed into the pork. So you can't have enough salt on the pork. All right, so if you think you're over seasoning it with the salt, I promise you you're not. So make sure you add a good amount on there, rub it really well, and make sure you get both sides. So once you season the pork itself really well, you're gonna cover the pork with the fat cap, and then what I'm gonna do is drizzle some olive oil on the skin of the pork and season that piece as well on top. Okay, so I'm using some of the oregano, the all-purpose seasoning, salt, and black pepper, and seasoning the top of that. Again, you want to make sure it's perfectly seasoned and use enough salt. So next what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get my foil paper and I'm gonna spray the inside of the foil paper with some non-stick cooking spray, and then cover the pork really well. You want to make sure it's perfectly sealed, and then I'm gonna place this into my refrigerator. So I put my pork in the dish I'm gonna bake it in already. I sprayed it, put the pork in there, and I covered it. Okay, and I'm gonna place this into my refrigerator to marinate overnight for at least 8 hours. I ended up leaving mine for about 24 hours, and it was just, the flavor was out of this world. It was perfectly seasoned. So if you want to leave it for 24 hours, you can. And then what I do is when it's time to bake, you take it out of the oven and you let it rest at room temperature for at least 30 minutes. Then during that 30 minutes, you're gonna preheat your oven to 300 degrees, and then you're going to place the pork covered in the oven to bake for about 5 hours. So my pork shoulder was about 9 pounds, and it took roughly 5 to 6 hours to be fully cooked. So halfway through the cooking process, you want to remove the pork from the oven and just see how it's cooking. So I removed mine from the oven and I tested it to see if it was ready to be shredded, and I noticed that it still had a long way to go. So I just covered it back and placed it back into the oven for another 2 hours. After 5 hours, I removed the pork again, and this time, as you can see, it was very tender and ready to be shredded. So what you're gonna do is remove the liquid in the pan. So I'm gonna throw that out in a second, and I preheated my oven to 450 degrees. So you want to crank the heat up in your oven and place the pork back into the oven to finish cooking. So at this point, you're going to place it back into the oven after it's already tender, and what you're looking for at this point is for the fat cap to become nice and crispy. And if you use a fork or a knife to knock the top of the pork, it should be very hard and it should be making this noise, and that's how you know your pork is ready and fully cooked. Okay, so it should be falling off the bone. It should be very tender. You should be able to take a fork and basically shred it. So depending on the size of your pork, it might take a little less time for your pork to be perfectly cooked. All right, so just remember to check it at the 3-hour mark and see how tender it is, and then you can go from there. And yeah, you guys, that's it for this recipe. Once the pork is finished cooking, you want to let it rest for about 10 to 15 minutes, and then you can shred the meat, shred it up, serve it up, slice it if you wish, however you want, and enjoy some of that crispy pork skin. It's so delicious. So today I enjoyed mine with some white rice and some red beans, which are so yummy. But this is the perfect pork shoulder recipe to serve on the holiday times, for Thanksgiving, or even for Christmas. It's so delicious, so yummy. Your family is gonna enjoy it, I promise you. Just don't forget to season that pork really well and add enough salt. Add a lot of salt because the pork is going to absorb the salt. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. I do hope you give it a try. If you do, let me know in the comments down below how it turned out, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.